with a screen. There we go.
Welcome, ladies. I think, is this on? This on, Mary?
Yes.
All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners July 18th business meeting. Martha Schrader is excused. She's ill. Our interim county administrator, Nancy Newton, will do the roll.
Good evening, everyone. Commissioner Bernard.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Savas.
Here.
Housing Authority Commissioner Reynolds.
Here.
Chair Ludlow.
Here, would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we get started, I wanted to read a couple things. First of all, as County Commission Chair, I've decided to remove the mass gathering ordinance public hearing from this evening business meeting agenda. I do not anticipate this proposed ordinance coming back before the Board of Commissioners. The Board has received a great deal of testimony, emails, and feedback sharing concerns with the proposed ordinance. I've come to the conclusion that the proposed ordinance is not necessary at this time. Staff has been outstanding in preparing the proposal, and I want to thank them for their diligence. Truly outstanding staff work on this. We do have staff on hand today. I would encourage those who wish to speak on it still, they're welcome to do that under citizens' concerns, so turn in a card to Mary up here and you'll be able to speak. The second announcement is, as of, let's see, the official signing about 15 minutes ago, I'm happy to announce we have a new county administrator. This afternoon, the Board of County Commissioners, by unanimous vote, appointed Donald Krupp as the new Clackamas County Administrator. Donald is currently the County Manager / Chief Administrative Officer for Thurston County, Washington. Donald brings a long history of public service to Clackamas County. The Board believes Donald will be successful in bringing Clackamas County forward and working with diverse groups. Donald is the absolute best of the 70 candidates that we took into consideration for this position. We feel very fortunate to have him here at Clackamas County. Donald's first day will be September 16th, and I would like at this time for Donald to come forward. We're going to have a photograph of the county commissioners. I'm sorry that Martha couldn't be here, but I thought it was a perfect opportunity for us to have a picture with you. Please welcome Donald Krupp. While we've got Donald up here, just for a second, I'd like him to say a couple words. I'm sure he's prepared for that. He's had a lot of public speaking opportunities. Donald Krupp.
Hi. Boy, I got to tell you, I am thrilled. I'm very much looking forward to the opportunity to be able to work for you all here in Clackamas County. I'm looking forward to working with the Board of County Commissioners. I've had a blessed life in public service, and I'm grateful for the opportunity I've had to serve citizens in Washington State for 31 years. But I'm very much looking forward to joining you here in Clackamas, Oregon in September 16th. So thank you so very much for the welcome.
It should be noted that Donald has been the county administrator, chief administrative officer for 12 years, kind of an unheard of length of time, and worked for the county for 19 years. So he brings great longevity and great experience to this county. The board will now recess as the Board of County Commissioners and convene as the Housing Authority Board for the next item. And I'd like to introduce again some man who's been here before, but the Housing Authority Commissioner Paul Reynolds to my left. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you.
And so the Housing Authority consent agenda. The clerk will read the Housing Authority consent agenda by title.
Okay, Housing Authority Consent Agenda, approval of a construction agreement contract
with Nomarco Inc. for public housing scattered sites renovations.
All right. The commissioners wish to remove any of the consent items for the Housing Authority.
That'd be all of them, wouldn't it?
That's true.
I move we approve the Housing Authority consent agenda.
I'll second that.
Motion been made by Commissioner Bernard, seconded by Commissioner Smith. Any further discussion or comment? I'll ask the clerk to take the poll.
Commissioner Reynolds,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Bernard.
Aye.
Chair Ludlow.
Aye, passes unanimously 5-0. At this point in time, Paul, thank you. You're dismissed. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming tonight.
Thank you.
Oh,
I jumped the gun.
Yeah.
He was supposed to make the motion.
yeah,
but
we
That's okay.
give deference to the fact that we have an appointed gentleman from our housing to do the motion, but I'll take that up with Commissioner Bernard
There was
later.
a delay there. I like to move things along.
Woodshed is where?
Start with that. The board will adjourn as the Housing Authority Board of Clackamas County and convene as the Board of County Commissioners for the remainder of the meeting. We have a presentation now, a presentation of the election office, an integrity report by County Clerk Sherry Hall.
Good evening, Commissioner Bernard, Commissioner Savas, Commissioner Smith, and Chair Ludlow, and thank you for the few minutes that you're giving me in this busy meeting tonight. And most of this report I'm going to read because, as you know, the devil is in the details with elections, and I do not want to skip any. Last October, the County Elections Office reported an incident of ballot tampering involving a temporary county elections employee. The employee was caught immediately, and despite lots of media speculation, the integrity of the November 12, 2012 general election was never compromised. Was never in question, actually. My office reported the incident immediately, and we fully cooperated with the Oregon Secretary of State and the Oregon Department of Justice. I'll slow down, okay?
Take your time.
Election integrity in Clackamas County is paramount to me, my staff, and Clackamas County. As a direct result of the ballot tampering incident last fall, I created a nonpartisan committee to investigate ways to further enhance election integrity in Clackamas County. Today, I'm pleased to share with you this final report, which describes the work that was accomplished. The committee was called the Election Integrity Committee, and there were 9 members on the committee from 3 sections of political party. Nancy Bentham, the Elections Division employee, retired. Arlie Dodson, the Clackamas County Democratic Party. Vicki Greenwood, Clerk's Office, retired. Myself, Sherry Hall, County Clerk. Margie Hughes, Clackamas County Republican Party. Steve Kindred, Election Division Manager. Scott Sedaris, County Counsel. Larry Skidmore, Clackamas County Democratic Party, and Jennifer Wessels, an Election Division staff. A total of 5 meetings took place, one in December 2012, and then another in January, March, May, and June of 2013. The March meeting included a trip to Multnomah County elections for a tour of that facility and an explanation and discussion of their processes and procedures. The committee was tasked with 2 things: to decide what enhancements, if any, should be made to Clackamas County's election practices and procedures in order to prevent the possibility of ballot tampering in the future. The November incident was truly an anomaly, and in its wake, county staff reacted properly and promptly. There must never be another incident that might compromise an election. The committee was asked to consider any reasonable and additional safeguards that should be put into place. The second task was to review the election procedures from the point of view of an elections observer in order to enhance transparency. The clerk's office views observers as partners in the process. Observers are citizens who are experienced and independent. They're encouraged to ask questions. And observers are an asset to county elections, not only in making sure the process is working perfectly, but in also letting the public know that all is truly going well in the elections division. The result of the committee's work were several immediate changes. The desired result of the changes would be to deter any individual from tampering with ballots, because ballot processing security must be first and foremost in everyone's mind at all times. We came up with 5 changes. The first one, the processing tables where ballot envelopes are opened and ballots are inspected, which is the location where the incident occurred, they are now realigned. They are in perpendicular position rather than parallel to the observer area, and this allows observers to more easily see the entire process. The oath that all temporary workers swear to for each election has been revised. Before this revision, there were separate oaths for separate tasks. The new single oath includes all tasks that may be performed by any election's temporary worker, and a copy of that was included in your packet. The third thing, only unique color pens are allowed at the processing tables. Our decision took effect immediately when the incident happened, and then the Secretary of State issued a directive to all counties in Oregon requiring that only distinctive ink colors be used at the processing tables. Number 4, the number of supervisors in the processing area has been increased. Historically, there have been 2 supervisors for the whole room of up to 16 tables of 3 people. It has now become a standard that 1 supervisor handles no more than 5 tables. And while the November ballot tampering was detected by a table worker, not a supervisor, more supervisors in the area should deter an individual from wrongdoing. And number 5, only the complete processing team, which is members of different political affiliations, will be seated at the table at any one time. When one member must be absent temporarily, no matter how short the absence, other team members will stand and remain standing until each member has arrived back at the table. It should be noticed that these changes were put into effect for the May 2013 special districts election, and the processing teams, without exception, welcomed the changes. Another change that has not yet been fully implemented is to enhance all doors to the processing areas so that individuals will be tracked as they card in and card out with their ID badge in and out of the area. Presently, individuals only card in, and there is no precise record of when a person leaves the area. We hope to have this change in place before the May 2014 primary election. And this change includes the installation of new card readers by the facility staff on the inside doors of the processing room. One item still under discussion is the addition of cameras in the ballot inspection area. It should be noted that cameras are already in the ballot tally room and were present there long before the Secretary of State mandated their presence. Cameras are also in place at each entry point and exit point from the ballot processing areas, as well as the front counter in the election office area. Cameras would not detect ballot tampering, since we would not have a person reviewing each team of ballot processors, either on the other end of each camera in real time or in hindsight. This is the job our supervisors do when they're in the room with the processing teams. Some counties in Oregon have cameras in the ballot inspection area, but none that I'm aware of have a focus which would have detected the type of ballot incident that we experienced in November 2012. None of the counties which have cameras review the activity in real time or hindsight. Nevertheless, since cameras would give us the ability to follow up on allegations of wrongdoing, it seems appropriate to have cameras installed in the ballot inspection area. My understanding is that the Secretary of State's office is looking into making this a requirement in all counties. If this becomes the case, it's likely that funding for cameras installed in that room will be made available at that time. And this concludes my report.
Well, Ms. Hall, I want to thank you for reporting those enhancements. Those sound wonderful. I know that I feel very strongly that both you and your staff over there have high integrity. I was very impressed that this was even caught. It is definitely a nonpartisan issue that cheating went on, and the woman has been appropriately punished. I also want to say that I know that there's been some mistakes over there, and not necessarily by you, but by your staff in the past. And I want to say to the world that If we let every department head go and/or elected official because their staff made mistakes, we'd have few employees left here at the county, because mistakes are natural and they happen. But again, I want to compliment you and to wish you the best with your changes, and it sounds like you've really tightened things up well.
Thank you.
Any more comments?
I have a question.
Yes.
Cameras are not present at the ballot prep area.
No, they're not.
Do you plan on putting them there?
It's an item for discussion.
Who would you be discussing that with, Sherry?
Well, we discuss it within our staff and other elections officials in the state. And there's one example. If the cameras are overhead, depending on how close they come to what we're doing, we remove the secrecy envelope from the signature envelope and make 2 stacks. Then we remove the signature envelopes. And then we take the ballot out of the signature envelope and stack the envelopes and then stack the ballots. And the ballots are face up with the way the voter voted, because that's what we inspect. Somebody that might get that film as a public record may really focus down on what those ballots are saying, and they may go back and count the envelopes, including the signature side. And how do we know that the ballot would remain private? There is a county that has cameras in their room, but it shoots across the room. So there's just a lot of discussion about how the cameras should focus on the work that's being done.
Okay,
And so far, the Secretary of State's office has not required it.
okay.
That's part of the reason why, is because you have to figure out where you want them focused.
But you haven't disregarded that or, totally excluded the idea. You're still evolving, trying to figure out what would be the best.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Sherry.
Thank you.
And now we're going on to citizen communication. I have some cards up here. I'll call people up in twos and put people on deck. If you put 2 cards in, you will only have 1 opportunity to speak. You're welcome to have the 3 minutes and talk about whatever you'd like. The first 2 people are Joan Zuber and Tim McFarland, followed by Jeff Weekly and Jeannie Freeman.
Should I begin?
Shirley.
Yeah, my name is Joan Zuber, and I live in the very southern part of Clackamas County. I'm the vice chair of the South Clackamas CPO, and I had been prepared to come in and speak about the mass gathering ordinance, and I understand that that is off the table. I watched the tape from last week when Chair Ludlow was saying that he appeared to believe that this was a good thing to have, and Jim Renard for health, safety, and so on. I have a real concern about this because of where I live, and there has been mass gatherings that have been with drugs, a lot of alcohol, music going on, et cetera, a lot of littering, a lot of trash. And if you were to have it where it was going to be like a minimum of 750 people, then that's not going to cover these. The 300 would probably do it. But what I want to know is, what is the county going to do now that this is not something that's in effect? Because I know when the police are called that they don't want to go in and approach this type of situation for their own safety. So nothing happens there. And oftentimes people that live in the area are afraid to call because they feel that they're going to be retaliated against. So I want to know if most of the people that were testifying that I saw in the video from last week were people that lived in the northern part of the county, in the urban unincorporated areas, and they have response time for sheriff's deputies. They probably wouldn't have the type of wild craziness that goes on back up in the hills. And so this is not the type of situation that they would probably be dealing dealing with. But I would like to know, what are the plans now that you are not going to have this? And how is the health and safety of the neighbors and the participants, how is that going to be taken care of?
Commissioner Bernard.
Well, first off, if it's a rave, we'll have to go to court instead. So we'll still try to stop raves. Well, we divided the county up into zones, 5 zones. I believe you're probably in
I think
Chair Ludlow's zone.
I think you're our person.
Oh, I could be. So my intention is to go out this summer in the next 6 months and talk to the people who are most greatly impacted by those kind of things and try to educate them and make sure they understand what this would mean and the fact that it doesn't address the subject matter. It simply addresses mass gatherings for life safety issues. And then I intend to ask the commission to consider it in the future. So for now, I'm going to, we're going to set it aside. I'm going to spend the summer talking to the rural community who would most greatly be affected by that and see if I can educate them, gather some support for this initiative, and we put it back up for discussion and hearings again in the future.
Well, I didn't realize, and none of us with the CPOs and the hamlets that were for something to happen, I didn't realize there was going to be a vote taken. I mean, people thought that it was moving along and that, there seemed to be good support on the Board of County Commissioners, and we didn't think it was just all of a sudden going to just go away. But the other thing is with the Sheriff's Department, though, because they will not come in, and a lot of times these raves are not planned that much in advance. They're sort of an impromptu type thing. And I guess a couple of years ago at Nestacada that there was a poster at the tackle shop saying, having this party, and it went on, and I suppose you already know about that, but people weren't real thrilled about having to put up with that. So,
Joan, has your CPO weighed in on this as yet, or have you met about it and talked about it and, with the county at all?
well, what we were really concerned about, to answer your question sort of off, is that impromptu gatherings of large numbers of teenagers that were drinking and littering. And we had people from the Sheriff's Department come out and talk to us about that. And they were really at the time looking at trying to see what they could do about it. And then it faded off into the distance. And part of the problem is that we're very close to Marion County. And so I think that they would go up, party, and then they'd cross over and go down Crooked Finger Road to leave. And Marion County doesn't seem to be too interested in addressing drunken teenagers driving down their roads. So, and the Oregon Department of Forestry and some of these, they don't have any money for patrols. Yes, we have to that extent. We were happy. I said, well, should I go in and say something about this? And everybody's yes. Yes, go tell them we want it.
Well, I would think that, and Nancy, if we could do at least this for right now, is if we could do a compilation of possible remedies, questions, actions that neighbors can take should they either A, hear about it, B, see it starting, because, as you said, and we've been told by the sheriff, when you've got, let's call it 1,000 people out there, it's going to be a pretty sad day when 2 to 4 officers wade into that and say it's time to go home.
They don't even want to do it 200 or 300.
I don't blame them a bit either. But I think if we put out information as to what, and you talked about that the sheriff came out, and that's great.
Yeah,
But it's the
years
sheriff
ago.
and his other departments too, about what they can do should they see this thing formulating or hear about it happening, et cetera, at least for right now, that would really help the citizenry. Paul, did you have some?
Yeah, I just want to add, would you be willing in the future, if there is a committee form, would you be willing to serve on a committee to help us look into this?
Yes.
Okay. I do want to say that, on a side note, I think even if we did implement the ordinance as written, that those who chose to violate the law, those impromptu meetings of teenagers drinking on private property, urban or rural, would still happen, that this ordinance itself
Well,
probably wouldn't
it
stop
wasn't
it.
just the drinking, it was like your choice of drugs too, as far as.
Well, yeah, well, which is all illegal as well. So, we heard, and I was a commissioner back in 2011 when this first came to our attention. So I think the problem's obviously still there, and we need to cope with it. But we found out the deeper we dug into this, and we just work session after work session, and found out all the unintended consequences of this. And frankly, more people, innocent people, citizens being somewhat harmed actually by it and infringed upon versus the amount of people we're trying to help. So I'm glad I'm going to keep your name, and we'll keep your card. And anyone else, I'll probably be polling everyone else to see if they would be interested in serving on a committee to help us solve this problem.
All right, okay, well, I appreciate if something be done, because, it doesn't have to be thousands, it can be just a fairly small number. And like I said, a lot of people don't do anything because they're intimidated, they just hope it'll go away.
Oh, I want to say one more thing. This weekend, myself and Commissioner Bernard and Commissioner Schrader we did a ride-along with the sheriffs at Barton Park, Carver Park, where we have a lot of people going to the park and gathering. And even when the numbers hit about 40 to 50 people, the sheriffs still don't want to go in there, especially when they've been drinking, if they've been floating down the river and having a beer. It's legal on the river. It's not legal in the park. If you're underage, obviously it's illegal either which way. But yeah, under gatherings of a certain size, they really don't want to, it's dangerous. And especially when you have thousands of people on a very hot day gathering, those numbers rise. So it's not just in those situations, it's a lot of situations that have that concern.
Thank you, Joan.
Thank you.
Mr. McFarland.
Hi there. Talk to you on the telephone, and that's all I know. I've been a taxpayer for 37 years in this county. My last taxes were $4,600. She's handing out some pictures up there of the neighbor that I've had for years and the neighbor down the road 3 miles. Kind of an eyesore, aren't they? I was here in October about that trailer house with the wheelbarrows and stuff on it. You probably recall it. Okay, well, it's low priority. How is it 30 days ago, I turned in those semi-trailers parked on that corner of the property, and those semi-trailers are gone today. Now, is there low priority on that? No. It's just me, I guess. Because the neighbor that has the trailer house with all the obstacles on it works over in the next building right over here. They do whatever they want. They have a junkyard in their backyard. But code enforcement doesn't think that it's a junkyard. I wish some of you people, like you just said, that you ride around with police officers could come by and look at it and see the junk. I mentioned I had a dump truck years ago, and I had to pay $500 to buy a permit to park my dump truck on 5 acres. I had to be home by a certain time. I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that. I couldn't have more than 5 vehicles lodged on my property at one time. I've kept that rule. I'm under that rule. But this guy next door, he's got junk on junk on junk. But being his wife works for the Clackamas County, you don't do nothing.
Real quickly, I
Sure.
don't believe that she works for Clackamas County. She's retired from
Her
Clackamas.
car's sitting in the parking lot. She still works here.
Well, it's something I don't know about.
Linda Dunn, D-U-N-N.
Mr. McAllister, would you come up for a moment? Code enforcement is an interesting thing, which we've recently taken on to a large degree. We've done some overhauling and changes. We've probably got some more to go. But you well know about this, don't you?
I don't know about this specific case.
Well, I can give it to you right here.
Okay. You can't get any bigger than come to my house and look at it.
Oh, well, she'll take it to you.
He doesn't do
You know,
I know.
the county has some rules, that's for sure. And I drive by this. I drive by Barlow Road a lot.
You told me that. Stop by, would
Do
you?
you mind if I share it with the public, though?
I'm sorry.
I drive by this all the time. It is very unsightly. And I can certainly appreciate, and we had our conversation on the phone, that some people keep their yards a heck of a lot better than others. I used to have country property as well. But I think you gave us also a copy here of the people whom you have contacted.
Yes.
That include former Commissioner Jamie Damon and other county employees. Mr. McAllister, what can a neighbor do about something that they feel is, and probably others feel, is quite unsightly?
Well, I'm not an expert in all the code enforcement policies. So the best I can tell you is and again, I haven't seen these pictures, I'm not familiar with the property. Best I can tell you is I am happy to check in with the code enforcement or the division manager for them and clarify what the status of this is and why it's being enforced or not enforced, and follow up, but I just don't have any knowledge of it.
That's fair enough. Ms. McFarland?
Yes.
I appreciate you coming tonight, and what we'll do is we'll save your card here and give it to Mr. McAllister, and knowing Mr. McAllister, you will definitely get a call back. If you are then still not satisfied with the renderings by the county, I invite you to come back again and advise us. Mr. Bernard?
I just want to say that just because we may not enforce, meaning cite somebody, we'll often send them letters.
You have.
Amazingly enough, some people respond to those letters. And probably the guy with the trucks got a letter and he thought, well, I'm just going to move this, and he did. This person obviously is not responding to the letters.
He got 2 letters to even put license tags on that trailer,
You know, in the city of
and it's still
Milwaukee,
illegal.
Try not
And
to
this-
interrupt the commissioner if you
I'm
don't
sorry.
mind, please.
in the city of Milwaukee, we made a rule that the car had to be drivable and licensed to be parked in the yard. That's very challenging to do, and a lot of people might call that freedom of speech and the right to do things on your own property, and would argue that this person probably has the right to have these things on their property. So it's challenging. I mean, if one thing you know about this mass gathering, how much time we spent on this, and then it's polled. Are we gonna spend a whole lot of time trying to enforce vehicles that aren't licensed or registered on people's property, and then come to the last meeting and pull it from the agenda, spend lots of taxpayer dollars studying this? I don't think we should do that. So, I mean, it's a greater discussion about, are we gonna waste all our time on this stuff and then come to the last meeting and pull it? Or are we gonna, just ignore it?
In some senses, it is ironic that we have some people who are adamant about the First Amendment rights to free speech, but evidently there is some First Amendment rights to ugliness. And, but I will have Mr. McAllister follow up with you. I've saved your card, made a note on it that he will be contacting you. He will. I know you've been through a lot, talking to a lot of county employees. If we had teeth enough to take care of this right now, I believe, knowing the staff, we would have. So maybe the problem is we don't have the teeth to stop it. But I think you'll know better after you get a ruling from Mr. McAllister, okay?
And one of the other things I'll encourage to the extent possible is county has mediation services, and whether that's a viable option, so.
Well,
those are things
unfortunately,
we'll
that's a
talk about.
two-way street. It takes 2 to participate. If one doesn't, and I got a feeling after talking to this gentleman that you have one that will not participate. And I think you've tried that before.
He will not. Do you have a copy of, can I talk?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have a copy of the solid waste?
I have access to it.
Okay.
You
thank
can't ask him to cite a chapter and
Well, I'm
verse.
just
you know.
asking, but
Yeah,
I
he's got
know
access
pretty
to
good
it.
myself.
No, I have
I'll
access.
bet you
to
know
it
it by heart.
That's right.
Well, we're going to do our best for you. And again, we appreciate people coming here before us. That frankly, the amount of people that come forward and certainly remonstrated to us has made a difference in regards to my decision. It is totally mine, not this commission's, to pull from the agenda the mass gathering. But it's not to say that it won't be revisited in the future in some other form. That's up to this commission. So I want to thank you both for coming tonight. Thank you. Next we have Jeff Weekly, Jeannie Freeman, followed by, man, trying to get a husband and wife up here together. Here we go. Followed by Janet and Eugene Schoenheit. Either one of you can start.
Ladies first.
Oh, thank you. Good evening, Chair Ludlow and Commissioners, and I'm sorry to hear that Martha's sick. On June 27th, Cindy Lewis Wolfram came before you and asked that you pull your budget for your compensation from the budget that you were going to pass. Tootie, on that same video, and I'm going to give you the times because I'm going to ask you to revisit that, at 56.58, Tootie said that all elected Clackamas County officials are grossly underpaid, and that her $140 after taxes was going to charity, and that the treasurer or the county assessor are tied to your salaries, and they make a lot less money and are not competitive. She also mentioned that there were no lack of people running for, well, not Tootie, I'm sorry, Cindy mentioned that there were no lack of people running for positions for the board. And she suggested that it was a matter of how you were perceived in keeping your raises. Chair Ludlow, you said that all county salaries, including 2%, were given to the employees. Now, I sent an email twice to you, and I still haven't received an answer asking you to tell me where in the county it says that, because I've tried looking through the statutes. I mean, there's volumes of little places you can go on your site to try and figure out where your salaries are tied to any employees or any staff. Because I don't believe that to be so.
I don't believe I said that. I never said anything about it being tied to. I simply said, it's interesting, we don't hear people complaining when we gave 2% COLA increase to our employees, only to the elected officials. What I did say was that all elected officials benefited from this raise. I think Jim gave the exact quote, it was like 33,000 and some odd dollars. But also-
40-something.
I'm sorry, what?
40-something, I think it was.
It was not 40-something.
34.
Anyway,
Okay.
you know, the county commissioners are the least paid of any elected official. This is something I've said before, Jean. Are the least paid of any elected officials. They have not received a raise in 4 years, yet employees get raises, and why shouldn't we? Especially when they were recommended by the Compensation Board and the Budget Committee. This isn't just the commissioners making this decision. Jim, you want to make a comment?
Well, yeah, there is no tie to
Absolutely not.
commission and raises to the employees. The employees got, in the negotiations with the unions, got a certain percentage raise. There are approximately 400 non-rep employees. Some had not received a raise in 7 years. So when the union got a raise, we also gave them the same raise when the contract was signed. So there is no tie to elected officials and employee wages whatsoever.
Tootie Smith.
I'd like to correct you, you misquoted me. I did not say that they were grossly underpaid. I said they were underpaid in comparison to other counties. And so when you go back, I'd like you to really make sure, if you're going to come and testify, and I say this to anybody, and I said it earlier today, misinformation has a way of being misinformation. So,
Well, I wrote that right off. If you go
I
back to
did
your
not say-
testimony, I wrote that right off of the
would you
video.
please not interrupt me?
Let her finish, please.
Please not interrupt me. I know what I said. I was very careful with what I said. It's okay for anybody to come before the Board of County Commissioners, but I take great exception when it is misrepresented on what I say, and I'm making that very clear to you tonight.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Mr. Weekly.
Yes, I'm Jeff Weekly. I pastor a small Messianic congregation. This is my first time ever being here because I heard there was going to be an ordinance dealing with freedom of assembly. And that troubled me greatly because in principle in America, the freedom to assemble is a right. It's not a privilege. It can't be taxed. It can't be feed away. And so this troubled me greatly, and I'm happy to hear it's off the table now. But I just think rather than looking for new ways to get taxes, that the commissioners should be looking for ways to reduce taxes. Our economy's rough on people, and that's what you should be doing at this time. That's all.
Mr. Weekly, I agree with just about everything you said. Would you be willing in the future, if there was a committee, to sit on that committee?
Certainly, and what the lady said earlier about people doing drugs and alcohol illegally, we have laws for that. But obviously, the police feel like they don't have, for their own safety, they don't have enough personnel to deal with it in a safe way. So that does need to be addressed. And yes, I would certainly be willing to serve on the committee.
Thank you. I just do want to say that one of the issues we had, I just think that for the higher number gatherings where the fees could run up to $2,500, I just felt that that was very onerous and actually would probably discourage, if not eliminate, a lot of well-organized, long-standing annual events that already occur in the county. I just thought that for $2,500, that was very steep, and I'm not really sure what kind of value that would really bring. And I thought there might be an easier way to get people in compliance if we were maybe to post those requirements. But it's very complicated. I appreciate you coming forward today, and I'm writing your name down, and we'll keep your card if there's a committee formed in the future.
A real quick question, Mr. Weekly.
Yes.
I see by where you live, you do not live in the country.
No,
If you lived in the country and you had a farm of 5 acres, and the 20-acre parcel next to you, all of a sudden you started seeing cars assembled and a band assembled, and for a 5-day period, they had a party with, let's say, 1,500, 2,000 people on there. Would you have a problem with that?
well, if they're disturbing the peace is already on the books.
What that
so-
is? I don't know what that is, sir, disturbing the peace. Right now, that is one of the problems. We
Right.
can't stop that. And that we all know, you should all know that the state has the rules on aggregating 3,000 people and above for any kind of a party or gathering. So the state's already taken away your First Amendment rights if that's what you're worried about. But sir, if you lived in the country, as I have, and you had all of a sudden a big party form and it went on for 4 to 5 days, and believe me, some parties, as described by the previous leader at the CPO, are not exactly well organized, let alone have the most gracious people attend.
I understand.
But try to put yourself in, we all talk about First Amendment rights, and I'm a champion of that, and private property rights. But one of the private property rights we have is for the quiet, peaceful enjoyment of our own property. And believe me, as described previously, it ain't peaceful and quiet enjoyment when one of these things happen. And right now, we have no teeth to stop that.
Right, and I see nothing wrong with governing people who are not peacefully assembling. And what you're talking about, when someone is having a party that's loud and, music blaring that's disturbing the neighbors, that's not peaceful.
If we had 500 people, and they were rowdy, as Joan previously described, we would have to send in the National Guard, sir. We don't
I
have enough
understand.
police to take care of that problem at all.
Well, the answer is not to take away constitutional rights.
Of the neighbor who's next door to it happening, those constitutional rights, sir?
Either one.
All right.
Government has a sticky job to balance both parties.
They do indeed, and we are that government. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Janet Schoenheit and Eugene Schoenheit. On deck is Ken Howard and Patrick Nesbitt. Oh, you want to see it? Baby. What did I do with that? Did you get that? Did you get that? I got it. Okay. You want to see that? Go ahead, either one.
Hello, I'm Janet Schoenheit from the Oak Grove area. I didn't know about your change on the agenda until I got here tonight, so don't smirk at me. Safety has taken the forefront in our country, and our rights are being pushed down in its favor. We see this in the IRS placing tens of thousands of Social Security numbers on the internet, and the NSA, National Security Administration, tapping citizens' phones and computer information wholesale without court orders, for just 2 examples. We have laws on noise according to how much it is allowed and when it is allowed. We have laws against the sale of illegal drugs. We have laws against disturbance of the peace. We have laws against physical attack of a person. Attorney Mr. Madcore said that we have a law regulating gatherings of 3,000 or more people. Is it possible that we have the laws necessary to keep us safe, or are we not enforcing them? Now, your previously proposed ordinance goes further to attack our First Amendment right to make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Putting a price on peaceable assembly would make it more difficult for people to assemble, and more so for people who are poor. Peaceable assemblies for free speech purposes do not entail admission tickets or head counts, as no one can know how many will appear. I give way to wise old Benjamin Franklin, who stated, "Those who would give up freedom for safety deserve neither." Is that how we're going to be? This is my final thought for you before you consider further ordinances that would decrease our rights. The chair of the Citizen Watch Committee could not be here today, but asked me to advise you that their membership of almost 100 county citizens were against the mass gathering ordinance. And I thought you still should know that. Thank you for protecting Clackamas County citizens' rights by not voting for an ordinance such as the mass gathering ordinance that would take our rights away.
Eugene, go ahead.
Okay, Eugene Schoenheit, I just wanted to address something, John, that you've said, and you worry about other people's rights, and I agree with you. The people next to the event have rights too, and part of the law is called a dB meter, and there's noise limitations. There's all kinds of laws basically that apply to everyone, whether they're holding the event or being next to the event, and how they have to comply. I want to talk about Lou's Drive-In, and I think Paul knows about this. About, if you remember about 6 years ago, it was quite a large event. Several thousand people attended. McLaughlin was fairly full of traffic. Clackamas County brought in police officers from Milwaukee, Gladstone, Tualatin, Beaverton, Portland, and basically they set up a Gestapo operation. They had about 30 motorcycles and a half a dozen police cars patrolling this little area because they were worried about what was going on when really there was nothing going on. But I want to make the point because they have the power to bring in more people, if they need it on an event. And we have more than, say, 1 or 2 Clackamas County police officers you can call up at one time, and they shouldn't be afraid to address a few people, especially people who are peaceful. One point I want to make about the ordinance here that I need to bring up, I felt was important. You talked about the code here. You talked about 90 days to have to apply for a permit. No advertising or anything is allowed in 90 days. So basically, what you would be doing is telling the person applying for the permit, well, wait a minute, what about advertising the event? You know, once they actually get the permit. So you're really talking about 120 days and not 90 days. I mean, that's what you're inflicting there. And I also want to point out that the way you handle business here, this process is actually the wrong way to do it. You know, maybe your committee is a good idea, but about four weeks ago, you know, this thing just appeared, you know, and then you were asking for public comment, you know. I mean, it just appeared. You didn't even come out and say, well, we have something proposed here, and we're going to ask for, you know, public comment before we move on. It just appeared. Then we make our public comment, we come back again, and, well, now we're coming up here to the second hearing, or whatever. It's still there, and you're still going gung-ho. So I'm down here tonight because you were still going gung-ho as for, you know, a few hours ago. And I'm just saying that how you do business, you're not looking for public comment before you do these things. Thank you.
Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've received a lot of emails on my personal email as well as my county email on this subject. And if you folks will remember at the business meeting last week, I said I'd probably vote no. That seam has been lost, and I was misrepresented on that. And I don't appreciate that. And as with the last person who testified, you have a right to come here and to say what you want and to tell the truth. As me, as an elected official, has the same right to express my views on the subject and then remind people of what I said when I was misrepresented. And I'm not saying it was you two who did it, mind you. I'm just taking this opportunity to say that. I'm also aware of an online newsletter that I felt grossly made and I will use the word grossly this time, misrepresentations onto what this mass gathering ordinance did. As a matter of fact, in this ordinance, we loosened up anything that would people on their private property would have. We even upped, weddings and private events to 750 people for 12 hours. You would not have a permit. You wouldn't have to do anything. All these really good things in this ordinance were not understood. And that what prompted me to say that I was probably going to vote no on that. I had not changed that. So all the people out there, maybe that aren't present here today, but are listening to me, I'm reiterating my no on this, because we do post things online and we do take public testimony. What has happened in this case, I believe, is this is one of those times when government gets so far ahead of where our public is willing to go that you enter into a dangerous area. That's why I think we need to set up this committee, public committee, to go over this, to let you know why it spurred us to start taking opinions on this from our staff to do this. I think as government elected officials, we are visionary, and we try to take care of things that we might think that will happen in the future to harm. It was never ever an attempt to infringe people's First Amendment rights. But I want to say something just as a caution. Raves will continue out there. You will have, by law, less people allowed on your property than normally you would if we would have passed this. Illegal activity will continue, and our hands will be tied to a certain degree to regulate this. And the reason why we're doing this is our reaction to what happened in the legislature 2 years ago, a session ago. So while I am not a fan of raves, I don't want to vote for this just to the fact I'm voting for something where they may have illegal activity. That makes no sense to me. But I think we're pulling this back because I think the public needs to acquire understanding of what we're trying to do here. That's my thing. When government gets so far out in front of where the people's understanding is, it's time. And I'm not saying that it's time to pull back. And I'm not saying that people it's a bad thing that you don't understand this. I think you have real concerns about this in light of what's happening right now in the federal government. Yes, we all should be really watchful of things in our backyard. So that's my opinion on this, and that's probably all I'm going to say about this tonight. But remember, we did pull this off the agenda, so if people are going to come up and continue to say, well, you're doing this and you're doing this and you were full ahead until a few minutes ago, I take exception to that because this is something that I've been working on for a week. So whereas I don't tell everybody out there every little thing I'm doing because I don't have time, or what John's doing or what Jim's thinking, we are very mindful of this. So I think this county commission has been extremely accommodating of people's opinions and people's rights and their constitutional rights on that. I'm asking you to respect us as well as we respect you to state your opinion. Thank you very much.
Real quickly on a couple comments. First of all, again, I asked people to supplant themselves into the property next door to where one of these things was happening. There was a rave a few years ago where the police found out about it too late. And Eugene, you said, I don't know why the police would be afraid to do that. Eugene, you've never done police work or really observed it happening, because it would be at great peril with these particular individuals who are high, drunk, stoned, et cetera, would great peril for those brave officers to wade in there and say, this is all over, y'all get out of here. So again, I ask you all that are here for First Amendment attestations to put yourself as a neighbor. Now, it is noted by Joan that a lot of testimony is being done by people who live in urbanized area. Again, I've lived in the country where these things have happened, and my children couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep, and it went on and on and on. And I don't ask that that brave officers wade into hundreds and even thousands of people and say, break it up. It just doesn't work. First Paul, and then Jim Bernard.
Okay, well, I do want to, first of all, state that, if you guys have comments on that, I want to hear it. And if you guys, I guess part of the job I learned a long time ago is that when you come up here, you're a county commissioner, you're going to get bashed from time to time. So I'm accommodated to it. So, I do want to hear what you have to say. So, obviously we all ask everyone to be civil and be courteous and respectful. That's obvious. So first of all, you would serve on a committee if there was one in the future, okay? Is that a nod from
Possibly,
both of you?
yes.
Okay. I do agree with what Chair Ludlow has said with regard to being the neighbor. When I was really young, I was a victim. I grew up in a rural area, and I was a victim. My family was a victim. The whole neighborhood was a victim of a rave that happened in an adjacent property. It wasn't called a rave back then, but it was really the same thing, and it required the National Guard. And I happened not to be home at the time, and I was 7 miles away, and I got to mile 6, and the whole area was cordoned off for a day. I couldn't get back to my home for a day. It was a disaster. So it's real, happened way back in the early 70s, but by gosh, I know what that's all about. So, and I think there's positive intent. And I will say this didn't come out of nowhere. 2 years ago, the first rave in Clackamas County, or one of the first raves that came to my attention, our staff was directed by us, the board, then to look into this. So it really came out of nowhere. There was purpose for it. The legislature dealt with it. And so we, in turn, are trying to deal with it in a reasonable way. Obviously, we found the complexities. We found and realized a number of unintended consequences. We're responding to that. And I think that I was not compelled to support the fees and some other unintended consequences and pieces of this. In theory, I think that those homeowners, those property owners that are abiding by the law, should have some protection. And so how we do that in a fair and equitable way is down the road, I think. So I appreciate your comments, but I just wanted to say that it came out of nowhere. And the hearing process that we have, and I said it last week in my closing comments, granted it's a couple, 3 weeks, but you've had the comment, we've received a lot of it. I think the system worked.
Commissioner Bernard?
Well, first off, I think there are some things in here that we should consider, and that is a fee for 2,000 to 3,000 people over 24 hours would at least give us the opportunity to know it's happening and to make sure it's safe. that I have never seen an assembly over 3,000 people in Clackamas County for for 5 days. I mean, there's no question that would, and it would be an opportunity to make sure that the proper safety things take place. But the truth is that this summer, or next summer, or this winter, county council is going to come to us and say, I hear there's a rave. Do you want to go to court? And we're going to have to decide, are we going to spend taxpayer money, go to court, or we're going to say, Clackamas County is open to business. Raves, come here. And I think we have to address this problem. And like I said, I'm going to just, this summer, since I'm working in the rural zone, I'm going to talk to those rural people and, and see what we could do. But I think we could easily consider portions of this right now, I mean, not tonight, in the next few weeks, and look at these large gatherings that require some permit for the protection of the people who attend and the neighbors who surround it. And I'm sure somebody will object to it, but it's certainly something we ought to consider. 3,000 to 5,000 would be reasonable.
It's already regulation on 3,000 people.
Well,
You're talking about
actually,
people or
we would
dollars?
charge a permit fee.
He's talking fee.
I'm talking
Oh, dollars,
fee to
okay,
make
I didn't
sure
know if
we.
people were dollars. All right, thank you very much, both of you. Next up is Ken Howard, Patrick Nesbitt, followed by Les Poole and Herb Chow. Either one of you. Go for it.
Okay, good evening, Commissioner Ludlow, whatever you are, and the rest of the commissioners. Anyway, I've lived in Eagle Creek.
State your name. Could you state your name? Could you state your name?
Ken Howard. I lived in Eagle Creek for the last 33 years, and I have about 5 acres and surrounded by lots of trees and noisy people at times. So, I know what it's like to have neighbors who are really loud, and it wasn't a very large group. We're talking probably 20 people. They were very loud speakers, so it doesn't take 300,000 people to make a lot of noise. So this is a very sticky problem. It's not just an issue of the number of people at all with electronics. You won't solve it by dealing with large numbers alone. I want to point that out. I just wanted to mention that being that life, liberty, and property is God-given inalienable rights, whatever government does at any level needs to be really, really respectful of that more than anything else. So we want to err on the side of freedom. It's better to have some noise than it is to take away our freedoms. Okay, I don't think this is an emergency. This measure was taken up as a quote emergency. This has been going on forever, especially since there's been electronics. So it's not an emergency. It shouldn't be done that way. We have this 90-day thing, and the other case was 180 days. There are events, especially political events, that occur very rapidly. And sometimes we need to have meetings. And to put any time limit on that is really inappropriate because events can occur rapidly. So just keep that in mind for the future. Okay, regarding the application fee, I think an application fee should be limited to the cost of managing the administrative part of coordinating who gets to use which park or whatever, that kind of thing. But beyond that, it shouldn't be graduated according to how many people are there, any of that kind of thing. I don't know if that makes sense to you. It should be just as cheap as possible. And the deposit fee, that should be applied for groups that have demonstrated that they damage people's property and that kind of thing. I'm thinking in particular of the Occupy movement in Portland. And I also think of Tea Party groups. We don't damage anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
I have a question.
Yes, Jim?
So would you consider a composting facility on your piece of property? Because we're looking for one.
Next
I
to
mean-
it. No, next to it is what you're
Or,
proposing.
or next to it. You know, we actually stopped, thanks to the legislature, and I'm thanking them, a composting facility in Stafford on private property for business purposes that had a major impact, that would have had a major impact on schools, but nobody in that community wanted it. So when do we go over the edge? When are we going too far? I mean, I totally supported stopping the composting. All of us did. And that's an infringement on that person's right to do what they want on their property. And your neighbor Beaver Creek had a composting facility that was going to come. The neighbors didn't like it. We stopped that person's rights. This is a complicated subject and an issue that we need to take up because, you know, I'm a firm believer, probably shouldn't say this, that when you're a member of society, you do give up some of your rights. The closer you get to population, your rights decrease until you can't walk out the back door and fire your shotgun, or you can't raise pigs or cattle on your land no longer in the city. You do give up some of your rights. And that's true whenever you have neighbors. You have to give up some of your rights. That's part of living in society. So composting facilities, you know, your neighbor, if your neighbor want to put a composting facility, I'd be out there stopping it too. And you probably would be too. But they have a right to do that. So we need to have a greater discussion on how are we going to resolve this societal issue of protection of your rights over your neighbor's rights. It's a tough subject.
Commissioner Savas?
Ken, would you be interested in serving on a committee if there was one formed?
I would.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Nesbitt?
Yes, thank you. Pat Nesbitt, I am the chairman of the South Clackamas CPO for about the last 18 years, and I'm here not representing the CPO so much. A bunch of the people in my CPO did notify me of an event, a musical event. I'm not really sure what a rave is. Like maybe I'm too old or something, but maybe I don't know if that means you get to go naked or what. But the bottom line to me, anytime there's a big party, and there's going to be one in my neighborhood tomorrow night, and that I didn't do anything about it because I don't want to have the fuss with my neighbors. But with 300 people, tickets sold, with it advertised in the Buckaroo Parade with signs, and people, even the telephone company was selling tickets for a while, that we had plenty of time to figure out if this was a good thing or a bad thing. And that I think that if we hadn't raised a little bit of a fuss, that these people would be having this event with probably no liquor license, because they're going to have a beer garden. They wouldn't have contacted the fire people, and now they found out that that the barn they were going to have it in is not going to be able to handle 300 people, and it's going to be unsafe. So now the 300 people will be outside right next to my place. And and so just like these people who don't want their rights trounced on, neither do I. With a little bit of advance like this, with them advertising, that the neighbors could find out about it maybe in a more civil manner rather than just finding out it's going to happen. It is a lot of noise. We get our decibel meters out, tell the police, call them up, get on the hotline, say, hey, it's 95 decibels, get out here. I don't think that's going to happen. The traffic is going to be with 300 people. How many cars is that going to take on a 2-lane highway in the country with ditches on both sides? Where are they going to park? Hey, probably my house. I think I've got a free source of gasoline.
Charge $5.
Yeah, there you go. The safety part, fire. It's starting to be fire season, and I bet you some of these people smoke. What's going to happen when they throw their cigarette butts out in my pasture? I don't know. I guess maybe my rights are going to get infringed on, so the animals are going to get toasted. There's the sanitation, of course. How many porta potties should a 300-person event have? I don't know. Maybe they don't know. There isn't any rules for that or even guidelines. By having a little bit of a permit process, maybe I'm naive. I didn't even think about charging people for something like this. I think that it would be You know, if they have to have police, well, I guess they'd have to pay for something, but I doubt it. The liquor license costs some money, I suppose. I've never tried to apply for one. We are ag forest, and we're zoned that way. We're not zoned as a party zone. If you want to have a occupation in the country, you get a home occupation permit. I'm sure there's been never a home occupation for partying.
You live in the country specifically.
Specifically.
If you don't mind, I mean, personally, from your point of view, after this is over, if you don't mind sending the BCC an email describing what you went through, and I'm not saying it's positive or negative, but I think you got an idea. If you don't mind sharing with us how that goes for you, I'd appreciate knowing.
Yeah, well, it might go great, it might go bad, who knows? We'll find out tomorrow.
Commissioner Bernard.
And I'd be glad to.
By the way, there's a free app, decibel meter, for your iPhone.
Yeah, but what happens when I find out it's 95 decibels?
You do call
I
the,
think you should
call the
call the
sheriff.
police. You should make record.
And we want to report on that, because if you call the sheriff and you say it's 95 decibels, and you don't hear from somebody, which I personally doubt, then we want to hear that as well.
Okay.
Go
And
ahead,
I will,
Paul. Here comes
before
your
you
question.
say it, I'll be on your committee.
There you go.
And I just want to say, it was very interesting, again, I'm just going to mention the Barton Park, Carver Park, all the people floating on a very hot weekend, thousands of people out there, lots of police officers concentrated in that area, multiple calls coming in and in and in, and I'm sure that at right about that time, tomorrow night maybe, when you experience what you may experience, I'm sure that our sheriff's department's going to be overloaded over there. So, you know, again, availability of officers to serve, and we only have so many as well. So I hope it's a small gathering, and I hope everything goes well. But please keep us informed, as the chair mentioned.
And just a sideline, Tom McCall, thank you very much for having a nice little party out at McIver that went over really well back in the 70s.
Vortex. Yeah.
No trouble there.
Well, if you had to be there to understand that. So the next two are Les Poole and Herb Chow. On deck is Roxanne Ross and Regis Peregrine.
Good evening. Les Poole of Gladstone. I appreciate your putting this item on the evening's agenda, even though it was pulled with regard to the mass gathering ordinance, because it really provided an opportunity for the public to weigh in. And while it's been shelved for the time being, it does tell us that you are listening, and it's a very awkward situation. I own rural property. I don't need to tell you the multitude of stories and the kids I've snuck up on. But, you know, properly handled, part of it's education. When I had the kids breaking the gate down and raising hell, what I was able to do was not only catch them by myself and block all their vehicles in, but I had these neighbors that I told them were kind of scary types, and they probably wouldn't want my neighbor who watches my property to confront them. And I let them know that maybe they're littering at home and maybe their mom picks up after them, but when you get out in Mother Nature, you take care of it. And I addressed the simplicity of appealing to these kids that the reason we got to go back to people's property is they never knew we were there. And so part of the problem is the whole general attitude. And the gentleman that spoke earlier was absolutely right. 15 or 20 people can do havoc to no end. With regards to this ordinance as well, yes, Paul, I'll be on the committee. I've got about a lifetime of land use experience, so I won't be much more long-winded except to say that these events and this problem isn't going away. It's not going to go away. Finding a legal balance, finding a way to deal with these things is very, very awkward. But as Ken Howard said, you really have to weigh on the side of freedom. And I think that, as Eugene said, if, for example, they were only going to be able to have one every 90 days or something, you'd probably find yourself in court because there's people that just would want to make a big point out of it. So it does get a bit a bit litigious. We start looking at how are these unintended consequences going to affect citizens' rights. And when you get into that conundrum, the right thing to do is to pull back. Mother Nature has a way of ending these things. You're not going to have them going on in wintertime. So my recommendation is that when these events are going on, you just contact the Forest Service, and about the time they start dumping buckets of water from helicopters on them, it'll just disperse. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Chow.
Good evening, Chair Ludlow and members of the commission. My name is Herb Chow. I'm in Clackamas unincorporated area. And I did want to discuss a couple points that I've heard, and not meaning to beat the dog to death, but first of all, in the prior commission, we would not have seen this discussion. We would have had this thing implemented. So I applaud you for allowing us to speak and actually listening to us. Those who, so thank you. There is a thank you for you. We're not complaining totally, okay? You know, it took a lot for you folks as leaders, and I want to specifically name Judy Smith, Mr. Ludlow, and Mr. Savas. We all worked hard to get good governance in it, and by you doing this, you showed us that you care about what's going on. You care about the intricacies of things. You don't just want to put in a rule and have it affect everybody. We're hearing a lot about, you know, how somehow government can step in and control everything. It can't. I'll give you an example. Remember the shooting over in Clackamas Town Center? Did the police respond to that? It says you're not supposed to shoot people. That's the law, right? That didn't stop that idiot from doing it, did it? And before it stopped, 2 people were dead and a girl was injured. But who stopped it? Well, it was a gun-free zone that made the target on everybody's back. It was a concealed weapons gentleman that carried his concealed weapon, pointed it at the coward, and like all these cowards, he shot himself. My point is this: you can't protect us. There is no way you can protect us from everything. In the issue of noise, we had a drummer. I live in a cul-de-sac, and we had a drummer, a parent family. I thought it was perfectly acceptable to have his kid play drums with his windows up and it was facing my house in a cul-de-sac. When I went over to ask them to stop, they refused. Even calling the police on me one time, saying I just banged on their door for no reason at all. Eventually, after 7 calls to the police department, the sergeant came over at my house, measured at decimal levels, went over to their house and told them if they don't stop, they're going to get cited for it. Stopped it instantly. Took another couple of calls, and I followed up on it. So there are laws to prevent people from doing this that can be enforced. It's called a decimeter, and police have access to that. They just need to enforce it. On the issue about, you know, we saw where citizens can band together to help with these things. We saw with the shoe bomber on the airplane, it wasn't TSA and all the billions spent on all the laws. It was citizens who stopped it. We saw with the underwear bomber, it was citizens who stopped it. So let's, and I think at least with Commissioner Smith and Savas and Chair Ludlow, I think at least you folks understand that citizens can do a lot more to help bring the peace and keep the peace. And thank you so much for giving us enough credit that we can do that. Thank you for taking this thing off the table. I hope it stays off the table. Thank you.
Thank you. You better ask him, Paul. Wait, Herb.
Herb, do you want to be on the committee?
I'm sorry, what?
Do you want to be on a future committee if there is one?
I want to be in a future committee if there's one. I'll sure try to attend. And you know, speaking of committees, here's one thing that I want to caution you of. Damascus is a very interesting animal. When Metro stuffs certain committees with their people, they're going to get a different result, certain result. So when you do a committee, my advice would be please try to make sure people are objective, willing to listen to all the facts, not just already have a bent in the side that they're going to go on one way or the other.
You don't stack committees.
Okay,
not
I
this
know you
commission.
don't, and that's why I'm
Not
just a
this commission.
suggestion I'm making out as a public. I know you don't, but I'm just saying we see it
too many times.
I would agree.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the last two cards I have thus far are Roxanne Ross and Regis Peregrine.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to come and talk to you. My name is Roxanne Ross, and I'm from Gresham, Oregon, in Multnomah County. And just to give you a little bit of perspective, Gresham Barlow School District extends into Clackamas County, and I don't live that close to the high school, but Clackamas County is just shortly behind my house anyway. So I just wanted to say that that I'm here because of the proximity and what we've been going through in East County. Now, you may or may not know this, but Multnomah County is mostly Portland. And in the East County, that we actually have all these little teeny towns. One of them is Maywood Park, that's completely enclosed by Portland. Then there's also Troutdale, Wood Village. Gresham was kind of bigger, so most people have heard of that, and Fairview. So I want to call your attention to April 26th, when the Multnomah County Commission passed a gun control ordinance. Now, you may think I'm here to talk about a gun control ordinance, but it's not the gun control part, it's the ordinance part. The section of the ordinances where this gun control ordinance is about the police actions, it always refers to the area outside the incorporated city. And at the bottom of each ordinance, it says language as such, you know, that unless the city adopts this ordinance, this shall apply to the area outside the city. And this is according to the state statute as well. But this gun control ordinance was really unique because it actually did the opposite. And if you look in the Willamette Week article, Gretchen, I don't know if I have her first name right, but it might be Deborah. But Commissioner Kafuri actually said that they were purposefully did it that way because they wanted the small cities to fall in line. Fall in line are her words, not mine. So I just wanted to bring your attention to this problem. And I would respectfully ask, I'm really hoping you will, so I'm going to plead, I guess, that because we filed a little lawsuit against Multnomah County because I live in Gresham, and I like being able to go in front of my city councilors and have the kinds of discussions that we have before these kinds of ordinances. And we did not have that discussion in Gresham. We didn't have it in Trout. They did that on their own down there in Multnomah County. And the Multnomah County Commission is elected 4 commissioners out of Portland. We only have 1 for East County for all those little towns, and that 1 also represents a swath of Portland. So we have like very smidgen little representation on that commission. And so, you know, it's kind of the David and Goliath thing. And so I was hoping if you would be so kind as to direct your county council to draft a memorandum similar to what Gresham did, not so much specifically about it, but that you respect the authority of cities in your county, and that you recognize that your ordinances of a similar such, unless they're adopted by the city, apply outside of city limits. Because see, if you draft that, then I might take it along with me to the lawsuit for an exhibit.
Just
Please.
I think this county has a history of respecting the rules and laws of each individual city. I think Mr. Madcore could verify that. The problem is I don't see any confrontation in regards to right now any city or any citizens of a particular city saying that we are passing anything. And I have not heard, and I bet you I would, if
That
we
we're
are
passing?
that we have passed or trying to enforce something that we don't have a right to enforce.
No, you guys haven't done that. You're the good guys.
Thank you.
I'm asking
I haven't heard
you
that yet tonight.
to draft a memo like that in support of these little towns so close to Clackamas County out in East County,
Oh.
because it would be an example. It would be the example of how, you know, the good relationship is. And we would like to hold that example up
Oh.
to Multnomah County, who's
Yeah, I want to
somehow
take
lost
Multnomah
their
County
way.
on real bad, yeah.
What about their vehicle registration fee? We don't support that either, so
Yeah.
there's a lot
This
of.
is it's the section under the police action.
We did
So-
breeze through this. it is up to the commission,
You don't have to say yes or no now, but I.
Well,
I
thank
just-
you. I appreciate it. Let me off the hook. We'll go to the next person to testify. How's that? We'll take that under advisement, Roxanne.
You may have noticed a resemblance. I'm her sister.
I could
And
tell.
The smile is similar, for sure.
I let her go first, even though I was born first. But
Oh, you tell 'em.
in all things political, she goes first. I do live in Clackamas County. I'm a past ambassador with the Canby Area Chamber of Commerce. And so I know how sweet it is to live in Clackamas County. And I'm just very happy to be here. And I raised my son here and graduated from Canby High. He's been serving in the United States ever since.
Wow.
The United States Army, I should have said.
Bless him.
But I just wanted to be here in support of this lawsuit and of drafting a memorandum that just reiterates how Clackamas County respects the sovereignty of cities, incorporated cities. So
Well, again, that's a source of discussion, which we may take up. But again, entering into the fray with another county about their rules, whether they'd be frankly ridiculous or not, is probably not something this commission is going to enter into.
I wanted to warn you, you're not about to fall over in your chair when you look at this memorandum. It is copied a little crookedly.
Oh, I think we've had a chance to breeze over it. Jim Bernard?
One thing different, I believe Multnomah County is a home rule county.
We are not.
We are not.
A what?
Home rule, we're statutory.
And
There's a big
Gresham's home
difference.
rule.
Charter, excuse me. Okay, yeah, general law, but I think it's statutory or something is another way they say it. And they're a home rule county. It's a big difference.
And Gresham is a home rule city as well.
Yeah, and most of our cities, I think, are home rule.
Yeah, most cities are charter cities, and
Yeah.
so the laws work differently in charter counties. And so the people who would probably be the most interested in protecting the sovereignty of the cities would be the League of Oregon Cities. So you might gain a lot of favor that way. But I don't know if if the charter county operates differently than a general law county like Clackamas.
It does.
With regard to
Well, I'm
this
not asking
piece.
you to comment on them. I'm asking you to comment on how you do it here so we can hold it up as an example of goodwill.
I mean, the way we do it isn't testimony enough as to the way we do it?
Well, I don't think there's another county in the whole state that's tried this maneuver before that I know of.
Well, there was a saying in the last election, let me see if I get this right. Stop Portland creep. I think I'll just leave it like that.
Hey, we're feeling it, John, we're feeling it.
Thank you both for coming. I really appreciate your time. You know, in regards to, three of the commissioners had the opportunity to go up the Clackamas River, and I just want to say, and I've certainly been up there and seen the same thing, how despicable it is. And I don't believe it's a lot of Clackamas County residents that do the following. They bring it and they leave it. You know, it's that old rule when you go camping, boating, whatever, if you pack it in, you pack it out. Our beautiful Clackamas River is just ugly. It's got, you know, cans and bottles broken everywhere, but the cans at the bottom of the river, you can clearly see them all over the bank. And you know, we have very, very wonderful volunteers that once a year, twice a year, try to get out and pick it up, but it's overwhelming. And I just want to say how really unfair that is to Clackamas County in a very scenic area, that people would have to come out and I think one of the commissioners described a lady in a Kmart, two-person raft, which is about a 7-year-old person raft, going down the Clackamas River, which is extremely dangerous. But the commissioners went up there with the sheriff and saw this firsthand, and I would like the public to know out there, wherever you be from, because I got a feeling, like I say, there's a lot of people from out of county coming in and packing stuff in and dropping it there on our beautiful county and on our beautiful river. So again, the encouragement is, take your garbage home. If you bring it there, take your garbage home. Thank you. Thank you both. All right. Now, we are on to the other part of the agenda, which is, there's no discussion items tonight. There's a consent agenda. I'll ask the clerk to read the consent agenda by title.
Okay, the consent agenda. Under Health, Housing, and Human Services, approval of a new revenue intergovernmental grant agreement with the State of Oregon Department of Human Services Vocational Rehabilitation for establishing cognitive meditation classes, or mediation classes. Approval of a renewal grant agreement with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Supportive Housing Program for the Hope Leasing Program for the purpose of providing permanent housing. Approval of a renewal grant agreement from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Supportive Housing Programs for the Jackson Place Program to provide traditional housing and services for the homeless. Approval of an intergovernmental agreement with the State of Oregon Department of Housing and Community Services to administer Community Resource Division funds, which funds a variety of social service programs. Approval of a facilities use agreement with North Clackamas School District Number 12 for the Women, Infant, and Children WIC program. Approval of a home loan agreement with Northwest Housing Alternatives. Under the Department of Transportation and Development, approval of an intergovernmental agreement number 27929 with Oregon Department of Transportation for right-of-way services for the Pudding River Whiskey Hill Road Bridge Project. Under the Development Agency, approval of a disposition and development agreement to convey real property from the Clackamas County Development Agency to BD 82 Boyer LLC. Under Water Environment Services, approval of an intergovernmental agreement between Clackamas County Service District Number 1 and Metro for the award of a Nature in Neighborhoods grant for the Rock Creek Restoration Project. Approval of an intergovernmental agreement between North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District and Clackamas County Service District Number 1 for maintenance activities on designated Clackamas County Service District Number 1 owned resource properties, and approval of a construction services contract between Clackamas County Service District Number 1 and T-Edge Construction for the Echo Valley Meadows Wetland Restoration Project. And that concludes the consent agenda.
Do the commissioners wish to remove any of the consent agenda items? I'll ask for a motion.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
Motion made by Commissioner Bernard, seconded by Commissioner Savas. Any further discussion or comments? I'll ask the clerk to take the poll.
Commissioner Bernard.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith. Aye. Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Chair Ludlow.
Aye, passes 4-0. County Administrator update. This is the Interim County Administrator Nancy Newton. What do you have to
Thank you,
say?
Chair Ludlow. I'll make my comment brief. Just for the record, I would like to congratulate and welcome our new county administrator, Don Krupp, and I will be most happy to change seats with him come September. Let's not make it any later, September 16th.
Thank you. It's Commissioner's communication now. I'll start with Commissioner Bernard.
Well, last weekend, we did have an opportunity to patrol the Clackamas River. Interesting problems. Alcohol is banned in our parks, but you can get a permit in certain areas, camping and within covered facilities, to have alcohol. Lots of people use those for weddings. But you can't drink or have alcohol at the park, but you can't look to see if they do, and a lot of coolers go through and onto the river, and most of them appear to end up on the bottom of the river. So we have a problem we have to figure out how to solve. My comment was they want us to pay for the Selwood Bridge. They can help us pay for the cleaning of the Clackamas River and perhaps additional costs for outside Clackamas citizens to come to use the Clackamas River. So we did fund, we did decide to fund on Tuesday additional sheriff's help down at the park, Carver and Barton Park, and that might allow us to actually patrol some of our other parks better. Wagon Wheel is one. So I thought that was great. Paul had an opportunity to help save somebody on the Clackamas River. You know, the Clackamas River and Mount Hood take a lot of lives. And this person in the tree who was not in really good shape, was actually a rescue swimmer, had been swept up under a tree and trapped. And here we have people on the river in Kmart inner tubes that explode as they're riding down the river. They end up having to walk, and that debris remains in the river for who knows how long. But it is a big problem. I was amazed, and we were on a quiet day, which is hard to believe. You could almost walk across the river in some places. We had quite a while to look for an interim, for an administrator. We had 70 applicants, and I think it was apparent, a lot of people applied just to apply. So there was a large group that weren't even considered at all. But we got down to 8, and then we got it down to 4, and we thought, well, actually, we're 3, and I argued for 4 because people quit, decide not to do it, and then 2 do. So thankfully, the last 2, and Don was one we had all agreed on, was probably our best choice, and he actually got an offer before he came for the interview. So it was getting a little scary there. But I enjoyed getting to know him, sit down and talk to him. I would anticipate a lot of change, but respectful change, thoughtful change, and change that will take a little time. And I'm sure we'll be looking for your input and our input, and we'll come up with a better county. I do have to say that Steve's one of his greatest asset, former administrator Steve Wheeler. He was probably one of the best budget officers I ever worked with. And we have some of the same budget staff that will help the new administrator move forward that. And actually, he told me he studied physics, algebra, something.
His brother is a physicist, the other one is an astronomer. And for his reading, I did ask him what he liked to read. He says, well, I like physics. And you're going, well, whatever,
So he's a numbers guy. Yeah. He likes numbers, and he likes to move them around, which is really a lot like Steve Wheeler. His little chalkboard always had things he was moving around numbers, trying to figure out how to get to yes. The industrial land issue that will be coming up is an interesting one. And I hope that our goal, even though some people may think it impacts them negatively, is actually to open up greater opportunity in industrial areas. We're trying to do that, and then we'll be looking at commercial areas, which oftentimes are in neighborhoods and have things in them that shouldn't be there and do impact the neighbors. So I look forward to that discussion. But I also think it's important that maybe county council and the commission look at, the codes, which we asked to take a look at, make them simpler, easier to manage and open up greater opportunity. Should we really be doing that if every time we do it, we get a lot of pushback for it? Maybe we should just leave it the way it is and, deal with it. So we're just actually, the intention was to protect the rights of the citizens, not reduce the rights of the citizens by looking at that ordinance. It had nothing to do with the content of what happened, whether it was a religious, political, or rock concert. Is not even mentioned in the ordinance. So the purpose was to protect the rights of the citizens. And I do intend to bring it back, put it back on for consideration. Of course, I need 2 votes. Now, this is not going to be soon. This will be maybe next winter when we have time to take input, and so we'll be ready next year. I'd like to do it sooner, and I think there are some portions we should talk about in this ordinance that we could do now. And so I'm going to have that. I'd like to have that discussion with the commission. So anyway, have a great weekend. Thank you.
Judy.
Thank you. Let's see, Tuesday night, I went out to our county parks advisory board meeting up at Hoodland Fire District. It was very good. Clackamas County has many parks. We also went over to Barlow Wayside Park and looked at their work project and hiked through the trails that all volunteers put in. And it's really amazing the amount of money, amount of volunteer hours that have done this. And they call themselves the Youth Crew. And the average age is 57.1 years old. And these men, in their off time, actually wheelbarrowed tons of gravel and large rocks and really big boards and these big bolts and rebar to build bridges across the creeks for people and stairways that go up, you know, the hills as a switchback. And I was really impressed. And they had such great passion for what they do. This park would have never been possible if not for the hours that they put in. And for this project that went from August 7th, 2011 to May 30th, 2013, they estimated that they had 675 volunteer hours, and that equaled to a donation of labor of $16,000. The materials cost was $2,636. A lot of it was donated. A while back, there was a movie filmed in Portland called Gone. I don't know if it was very good. Anyway, they had a scene in Forest Park in Portland, but they actually went out to Mount Hood to film it and pretended like they were in Forest Park because this area was so nice. So I thought that was kind of fun. Speaking of the movie industry, in Clackamas County, we are well positioned for that. There's a Hollywood producer's name, Suzanne De Laurentiis, who came up and gave the board a presentation along with Catherine Comer from our Economic Development Department. And it's very exciting, some of the movies that this particular woman has produced that we've all heard about. And she's very anxious to get it and find a location in Oregon so that she can do personally more filming and writing. And her goal is to employ veterans in her movies in all areas, you know, not just acting, but there's a lot of behind the scenes work that can be done. So she's very, very dedicated to do that. Her heart is in the right place. And she was a very nice lady. There's going to be a reception in September, third week in September or something like that, of which we'll be attending. So that's part of our economic development. It's just, you know, popping off the map because Hollywood has realized that we are very close. We are very diverse in Clackamas County. We have a team at Clackamas Community College with their technology that now Melhurst College University has teamed up with to teach the students, and they're just really cutting edge, off the charts, and we're really happy about that. And that's all I'm going to say.
And John and Tootie have both acted, John and I have both acted, and Tootie took tap.
Commissioner Savas.
Well, I just want to thank our staff for working so hard and accommodating all of our changes as we were trying to find some good ground with this mass gathering ordinance. And we didn't get across the finish line, but we've learned a lot, and I think that's valuable. And if we indeed follow through with this in the future, we've learned a lot. I do want to talk a little bit about that in a sense of, and I'll bring it up again in a different way. As you probably know, we talked about the Barton Park and we talked about Carver, but in between is where all the action happened, and the person who got hung up in the tree in the river was midstream. And all that whole 3 hours that we were out there, most of the time we went out there to do any kind of issues with addressing disorderly conduct, or drunkenness, or trying to rescue someone. It was all on private property, and we came across a family who had someone who was drunk and disorderly come off the river onto their property when they were actually mourning a loss of a family member, and it kind of ruined their weekend because they were near this tree, and it was just drama, constant drama, and it wasn't. First they were worried. Well, obviously they're worried for the people in the river that are perhaps getting in trouble or drowning or in peril, let alone their own family members. So we have a lot. I want to just thank the property owners along the river who frequently allow our sheriffs, big, huge fire trucks that go on there for emergency, the paramedics who drive all on their property. And you think about that on a daily basis, all day long over the weekend. That's the kind of imposition that these people have really suffered. And it just kind of goes to show that, you know, I think there is a right for peace and quiet. I think we have a job for which public safety. I think I reckon back to what a lot of our patrol cars say on the side. I believe it's to serve and protect. And our job as the county and public government is to provide safety for a lot of folks, and whether that's someone in peril or, you know, a family being imposed upon by someone who's being disorderly and drunk and going on their property and really taking on a family who's going through some tough times. So those are the kinds of situations I think that are real. They're obviously real, but we really need to deal with in the future. With that said, I think the only thing I want to close on is that we've been working really hard, actually, and even former county commissioners, former staff, current staff, been working for years to try to get some progress in the Sunrise Corridor. I know that last week we approved a contract with ODOT to do a portion, one particular project for the Sunrise Corridor that would alleviate some concerns and access issues for a number of the lawn field owners around that lawn field industrial area. This week, we signed another contract with another property owner in the area who's going to be impacted by this project. I want to, you know, thank everyone and staff who's worked hard for years trying to get these things underway. And as of July 8th, the Sunrise Corridor project actually started. And so that project is underway. And I think we all ought to be very proud that we have, you know, we've got that project underway. And one last thing, I do want to thank my colleagues, because I think that a lot of the comments here today and people are being critical of what we were doing in the mass gathering. We are well-intentioned. I think that's the thing. I know a lot of people acknowledge that, but what we're trying to do here with that is well-intentioned. And I know that each of my colleagues are well-intentioned. And, you know, and granted, we've hit somewhat of an impasse knowing some of these complications, but, you know, we'll try to find a means to protect and serve those folks.
Real quickly, a couple things. In regards to what Commissioner Bernard said about the commission rules say that, you know, I set the agenda. However, if two commissioners say they want something on the agenda, it shall be that way. However, my rule thus far, and I anticipate it'll stay that way, is if any single commissioner wants something on the agenda, it will be there. So, I mean, I think they have their own rights. I have some rights that supersede, or I shouldn't say supersede, but go beyond theirs. But I do not intend to keep anything from the agenda that any single commissioner wants to put forward. I alone made the decision to pull the mass gathering, and that is my right to do that as well. I think it's time to regroup and rethink this, and so I think that's what we will be doing in the next months or even years. We had a briefing on the Blue Heron site in Oregon City, and we're real excited about the plan because it's very aggressive to work out a master plan for this property. It's very potentially lovely and job-producing area. There has been extensive amount of work, literally millions of dollars worth of work to identify the problems, hazards, attributes of that property. We are in partnership with the City of Oregon City and Metro. We received a briefing from both of those entities in regards to the future. We expect by, I believe it was May of next year, that this visioning plan will be done. There are some great things that need to be saved at the Blue Heron, including petroglyphs, including the wonderful turbines that were the longest transmission line in the world, and that bringing power from Oregon City to the streetlights of Portland. And those turbines will be preserved also. There's also at least one very impressive building with huge, I call them CVG, that's clear vertical grain beams that are staggering in size. There's also the walls of the original Oregon woolen mills that preceded that probably will be saved. So additional buildings will be saved. We're very excited about the progress we're making down there, and look for good things to come. I do think it's terribly ironic that you know, we're going to build we hope, a world destination where people can enjoy coming to this beautiful site, to have weddings, to enjoy themselves, to recreate. And I think it's a sad thing that that our tourist industry, specifically our sport fishing industry, is affected so drastically by sea lions. There's no doubt in my mind that the sea lions back in the Indian days were snatching salmon out of their nets or away from them, that there'd be dead sea lions in the river. If you can envision the blue heron and this beautiful sight, again with weddings and incredible views that we've never been able to get, the public hasn't been able to get from that site. If you can imagine to put up with what they're currently doing down there, they have boats all day long that go along and blow off shotgun shots. That's not the vision of this blue heron site, or let alone our tourism trade for sport fishing that I have for this county. I want to comment on Donald Krupp. Do remember that we had, like Jim said, we had 70 applicants, and some didn't deserve to be applicants, but that's another story. We whittled it down to 2, and I want you to know that there was always a choice of this commission to have either one of the final applicants or none of the above. And this commission was not afraid to do exactly that, simply say, we're going to start over, because we're fine doing the way we are doing things. But we were not afraid of that, but we felt so strongly, again, it was a unanimous vote, that we hired this fantastic man. I think it's a real great catch for Clackamas County. The last thing I want to mention to you is, and I don't take usually much time with these, but I want to take a few minutes and tell you about my passion in life on a volunteer basis. I created a program called Through a Child's Eyes at Coffee Creek Correctional Facility. It was ironic how I got to do that. That's the only women's prison in Oregon. And before they sited it there, they had it sited much closer to the Wilsonville city limits, and literally 750 people linked arm in arm from Wood Middle School in Wilsonville. I formed an organization that was quite powerful and quite successful called Safety, Stop Any Future Escapees This Year. We banged the drums. We did all kinds of civil disobedience that was legal, and basically got them to move that prison. Then a friend of mine bought my Santa Claus services and said, you want to go to Coffee Creek Correctional Facility and see those little children sitting on their mommy's laps. I did that, and I had the beard on, luckily, because I cried behind my beard at the plight of these young people. You should all know that children of incarcerated parents have 6 to 7 times more chance, the children do, of going to prison than your children do. In the cases when men go to prison, mommies always get the kids, but when mommies go to prison, in less than 30% of the time, is there a father to choose whether they want those children or not. They are farmed out to foster, to any kind of relative that would take them. They are truly lost children. They are disadvantaged by education, by poverty, and simply by being lost by their mother. They still love their mothers. They're very forgiving of their mothers. They will always love their mothers. So what I wrote as a program, it's gone on for 12 years. It's award-winning, internationally award-winning. And what we do is we gather hundreds of volunteers in the summer. We still do our winter program and give great presents to those kids. But we go inside the prison walls and we bring in tents and pennants. We bring in crafts and games and free books. If you read a book with your mom, you're going home with that book. Personally sewn bags, all the popcorn, candy, snow cones that you can eat, all the barbecue you want, very relaxed sitting, lots of laughs, and you never see the concertina wire that surrounds you. And I say this again probably because if you have the opportunity to either volunteer with us, it's a world-changing event for a lot of people that go in there and see that we dispense only unconditional love for both the mothers and for their lovely and wonderful children that are in peril. And I think that's the best gift we can give them. And it's a 4-letter word, it's called hope. And without hope, these prisoners are lost, and indeed we all are as well. So where to go is wilsonvillerotary.com. You'll see the TACE, it's called Through a Child's Eyes. Again, the acronym is TACE. Program on there and some pictures from our events. But if you have the opportunity to donate and or volunteer, we've never advertised for volunteers, yet we have hundreds of them that regularly come in. Some have been doing it for all the 12 years we've been in operation. That event was this weekend in both the minimum and medium facilities, and we had just a great time. It was sunny, and the mothers, there are two great events at that time. One, when the moms get to just grab those kids as they come in and welcome them, because it's a completely different than a sterile visiting room. And then the other time that's most impactful is when they leave. It'll break your heart.
Thank you, John.
So anyway, that's kind of my passion. If you see fit to donate to this wonderful program, it's a 501c3. We run it through Wilsonville Rotary because we need $2 million worth of insurance in order to bring volunteers into a setting where you have to sign a form that says, if you are kidnapped or taken hostage, they're not going to negotiate for you. That's just the way it is when you go into a prison. Yeah, you know, I have never feared these women. And we've also had this program emulated at other prisons in the state. And now the chief women's facility in Washington, we invited and paid for the volunteer coordinator to come down and see how they can emulate this program in the state of Washington. I have been to men's prisons now where they've emulated this. Now, that's a completely different thing. You have gangbangers there, and they bring in instead, at Two Rivers facility, they bring in all the relatives. If you're a grandparent, you get to come in too. Because the only way, really, we all say that you can't change people, and only people can change themselves. But I'll tell you what, when a family puts pressure on a prisoner and says, you know, you got to straighten up your act, and they've got them as a captive audience, literally. They get to come in and say, you know what, you need to straighten up your act. It makes a profound difference in these people's lives. You know, these felons, only 30%, which is, we have one of the best recidivism rates in the nation in Oregon. And it's because of education. Some of these women don't know how to balance a checkbook, and neither do the males. Education is one thing, and again, that feeling that you have hope of acceptance out there after you get done serving your term. So I know that's definitely the longest oration I've given during my chairmanship, but I want to thank you for listening. And again, it is wilsonvilleRotary.com if you want to donate, or send me a message, and I'll make sure you get all the information about either donating and or volunteering next year. We have it usually the second weekend in July. It's usually lovely weather. But you will have the time of your life and feel greatly fulfilled at the impact you've made in somebody's life. So thank you very much. Oh, wait a minute. I have one last thing. We have 2 town halls left. We have September 11th Town Hall, City of Lake Oswego City Hall, Council Chambers, 7 to 8:30 p.m. It's City Hall in Lake Oswego, pretty easy to find. And Tuesday, November 12th Town Hall, the last one we have scheduled for this calendar year, and that's Oak Grove Community Council sponsored CPO at Roseville, 13505 Southeast River Road, Portland, again, 7 to 8:30 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking the time to attend this meeting tonight, and have a great weekend. This meeting is adjourned.